The other problem, as I mentioned before in the context of the safeguards agreement, is this nuclear fuel reserve. That is another thing that NSG states ought to write into their guidelines. In other words, the NSG states should agree not to help India amass a strategic fuel reserve, multi-year fuel supply reserve. They could allow India to overcome a cutoff of fuel supplies if it tests. And they should not provide any guarantees, as the United States expressed in the 123 agreement, that they will help find fuel supply sources for India if there is an interruption in fuel supplies. The final, and I think most important point in the context of the NSG decision has to do with the possible transfer of uranium enrichment, plutonium reprocessing, and heavy water production technology. These three technologies can be used to make fissile material, which is plutonium or highly enriched uranium for nuclear weapons. Now, there is no safeguards agreement that can be written that would guarantee that advanced enrichment or reprocessing technology that might be transferred from the United States or France or Russia might not be replicated by Indian scientists and used in its unsafeguarded nuclear weapons program. It's essentially impossible to prevent the knowledge about this technology from migrating to the nuclear weapons sector. So the basic solution here is that the NSG guidelines should explicitly prohibit any such transfers of these technologies. Currently, the U.S. proposal does not say anything about that. The Hyde Act does say something about that. It says, in essence, that the United States shall not transfer to India these technologies. So, unless Congress in the next few weeks, before the NSG decision, raises its voice and expresses its concerns about the inconsistencies between the 123 agreement and the Hyde Act, and the safeguards agreement that's under consideration and the Hyde Act, and the nuclear supplier group draft decision the United States is proposing and the Hyde Act. The Hyde Act conditions, restrictions, and principles could be undermined, to say the least. Now, that's because of this problem. That's one reason why Congressman Howard Berman, Ileana Ros-Lehtinen, Congressman Thornberry introduced a resolution last October, 711, which I would recommend that you take a look at, which calls upon the President to incorporate in the NSG guideline, I think it's 4 of the key conditions and restrictions on these issues that are contained in the Hyde Act. Let me just make a couple final points and then we'll open up for discussion, Q's and A's. We have to remember that, as Charles said, this deal is really not about nuclear energy, as he described. It's also not an arrangement that brings, as the White House likes to say, India into the nuclear nonproliferation mainstream. In fact, it does exactly the opposite. And first of all, absent a decision by India to stop the production of plutonium, which it continues to do, in my view and the view of many other experts, Charles may have his unique opinion, I don't know, maybe you agree, India will be able to increase its production levels of plutonium for weapons if it has access to international nuclear fuel markets for its civilian sector. Because in essence, it's going to be able to devote more of its limited domestic uranium supplies and spent fuel for weapons production if it chooses to do so. Now the other point is that unlike the United States, Russia, France, Britain, and even China, India has not signed the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. India has agreed to an unilateral moratorium, but that's not a legally binding moratorium. Now, if we're going to say that we want to bring India into the nuclear nonproliferation mainstream, and one of the basic standards that I think the U.S. And other states need to agree upon is that India must enter into a legally binding test ban agreement. Now, this is probably a bridge too far in the context of the current debate, but I mention this because at the absolute minimum, if the nuclear suppliers group and if Congress does not insist that fuel supplies are going to be cut off automatically if India is a clear contradiction of this global nuclear test ban norm and the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty